Hello, this is a short video called Some of My Experiences Meeting Jesus. So what would I say? I've just done a video saying that if you obey the commandments of Jesus, then he'd reveal himself to you. So what are some of my experiences? I think one of the first times I saw Jesus was when I met him in the flesh. I was on holidays once, and I was on a beach, and I was talking to Jesus in my mind, and we're having a good time. And as I was walking back from the beach, I said to Jesus, "Where are you here? Where are you now?" And he says, "I'm just beyond the breakers," which was just beyond where the waves were breaking in the beach. And I went to go out there, and the water receded about 100 meters. And as soon as I stepped towards the water, and I took that as a sign. I said, "What's happening, Jesus?" He says, "You're not going to meet me tonight, but you're going to meet me soon." And I said, "You said that you're coming back soon in the book of Revelation. So how long is soon? Because soon in that instance was 2,000 years so far." And he said, "You're going to meet me very, very soon." And a couple of weeks later, I was in Sydney. Jesus had told me to move to Sydney, and I was in Sydney, and I was having dinner with a friend of mine, a friend at the time, and I saw this homeless man walk past. He had a lot of energy on him, and I could feel a lot of spiritual energy. I assumed it was demonic energy, because he's a homeless man, I suppose, but he had a real presence about him. He came in and asked me if I had any spare money, and I was religious at the time, and so I said I'd buy him a meal. So I went and bought him a meal, and he sat down, and it was all too much for my friend, inviting a homeless man to sit down. And so my friend made excuses and left. And I said to the homeless man, could we come up further into the restaurant out of the cold? And so we did. And we're eating there, and I had to go to the toilet. So I went down to go to the toilet. I was tired, and I said to Jesus in my mind, "How long do I have to stay with this guy?" And a song came on the radio, "It ain't over till it's over." And that answered me that I'd have to stay as long as it took. And so I went down into the toilet, and went to the toilet, washed my face, slapped my face a bit, tried to wake up, came back and sat down, and in a really clear voice, the homeless man said, "It's really amazing, isn't it?" And I said, "What?" He says, "It's amazing when you ask Jesus a question and he answers you with the song on the radio, the chorus of a song on the radio." And he had my attention, because that's what had just happened. Then he said, "Can I share with you what I believe Jesus was teaching when he was on earth?" And I'd been reading the Gospels for the last few years, and had been doing a study on what Jesus had taught, and Jesus had set me that assignment, and I'd been doing that. And so this was very interesting for me. This was a very interesting subject. So he started, and after 1 minute of him speaking, his language was so profound that everything he said was so profound. Every sentence was so rich that after a minute my head was full. And I knew that if he kept on speaking, I wouldn't be able to remember what was said. And so I was tempted to say, "Can you stop now?" so I could remember what he said. But I looked across at him, and he was having such a great time, had a smile on his face, and he was expounding what Jesus taught. And I remember thinking to myself, after he went on for 10 minutes and he stopped, I was thinking to myself, even if I was told later by Jesus if I had a transcript, like 3 or 4 page document of what he just said, it would take me 10 years to get to the bottom of the richness. It would take me 10 years to understand that 4 pages. And so he went up to the counter and ordered another coffee, and he had an interaction with some people, and he actually had some sort of interaction with some people, and they were upset. And I remember Jesus said to me, he went and sat somewhere else besides sitting with me, and he was still standing there. That's actually getting his coffee, and Jesus said, "Go and apologise to those people for that interaction I had." And so I went up to the people, and I said, "I want to apologise for him. He wouldn't have meant to offend you." And if you really look at him, he looks like the spitting image of Jesus. And I just heard him speak for 10 minutes about what Jesus taught. And I really believe if Jesus came to earth, this is probably what he'd look like to test us. And so forgive him. And the guy said, "What are you, his keeper?" Which is like a scriptural verse. And I said, "No, I'm just looking out for him." So I went and sat down, and the Jesus homeless man come up to that couple and asked them if they had any spare change in sort of a rough voice. And I seen the guy get out about $18 in change, 10 and a 5, and a few dollar coins gave to him. And the Jesus homeless man went around the whole restaurant asking people for money. And years later, I'd spent a lot more time in McDonald's and around homeless people. Years later, I found out that a homeless person would be lucky if they got $2 in a whole McDonald's, asking everybody. Nearly everybody says no. So I found out that when I sat down with Jesus later on, he had $35, and he said, what should he do with the money? How should he spend it? And I was surprised he had $35, but it wasn't until 2 years later I realised that that was a miracle that he'd got so much money off people, because I'd never seen that. I've never seen that happen before. I've never seen that happen before. He did something, and the manager was upset with him and told him to leave. And I went down and stood next to him, and I looked over to see when a bus was coming. I looked back, and he disappeared into thin air. And I looked up the street, and I looked up the laneway that he could have gone. He was nowhere. It just took me looking across to the bus and looking back. My eyes weren't on him when he disappeared. And I've met an angel before, and had the angel, 2 angels before, and I've had them disappear. So I've on another occasion, I was at a homeless hostel, and I felt this very strong presence come in the room, and I turned around and I saw this homeless guy that had the presence on him, and I whispered to my friend, "That's Jesus." And my friend said, "Yeah, he knows." And there was about 3 or 4 Christians at the homeless centre that day that all knew it was Jesus in the spirit, and we were talking, why would Jesus come and visit us in the homeless hostel? And on that occasion I didn't go up and speak to him. The funny thing is that although you may be a Christian, and although you may have a good relationship with Jesus, when he turns up, it's hard to actually approach him and dialogue with him. I've seen him a few times, all dressed as homeless men, and recognised that it was Jesus. Because he was a homeless man, and it's hard to actually go up and talk to him. You wouldn't think so, but I have found personally it is. The first time when he met me as a homeless person, he approached me and asked me for money, and then I got a hamburger for him and sat down and talked to him. It was his initiation. It was he initiated the conversation. He started the meeting the first time, and I carried it on. And so that may interest you. I remember about 10 years after that event, I'd written my book, The Parables of Jesus Made Simple, and I really feel that the wisdom contained in that book, The Parables of Jesus Made Simple, contained what Jesus had said in that 10 minutes that he spoke to me. I think that I've distilled the wisdom that Jesus taught in that 10 minutes into that book. So that book's called The Parables of Jesus Made Simple. So that was about 10 years later to the day that I actually met him. I've been in a country town, and we made friends with this homeless guy that used to be a lawyer apparently, and we made friends with him, and one day we bought some pizza, me and my friend, and we saw him and asked him if he wanted some pizza, and he was midway eating some pizza, and he started to talk, and his voice changed, and it was Jesus speaking to us. And my friend, who's a Maori, filled up with tears, because he always filled up with tears when the Holy Spirit was moving on him. And Jesus spoke to us through the voice of a homeless man. And I have to say that I've met him 3 times in the body of a homeless person that I've already known. So he'll just come in like a demon will speak through someone who's got a demon in their life. He'll just speak without any announcement. The spirit of anger will come out of a person, and they'll just say something in an angry voice, and it'll be a spirit speaking. Well, the same happened with Jesus, that he'd just enter a homeless person and speak, and as soon as he spoke, you know, it says in the parable of the Good Shepherd that his sheep know his voice, and as soon as he spoke, you could recognise that it was Jesus speaking to you. So I've met him a number of times in friends that were homeless people, and Jesus has just spoken. So I had a vision, had a conversation once with a medium while I was asleep. Jesus woke me up and spoke to me in a dream. Didn't wake me up. He spoke to me in a dream and said to speak to Jonathan Edwards, and I said I knew he was a medium on TV, and I said how, and he said just say his name. So I said his name and gave him an instruction to stop being a medium, and then after that, Jesus woke me up, and I was awake, and Jesus said for me to request something. He said, you often talk to me, but you never ask me for things, so ask me for something. And I thought about it, and I said, I want prophetic dreams, and I want to experience visions. And from that day on, I started to experience visions and start to see Jesus. So I saw Jesus a week later in a park, and I was talking to him. It was my birthday, and at that time, Sadhu Sundar Singh, which was a famous apostle in India that died, and Keith Green, the famous musician, Christian musician, they were in the park too, and they talked to me and addressed me, and came down for my birthday and made things happy. So that's one of the first times I saw Jesus in a vision. I remember I've just seen Jesus quite a number of times in visions, but one time he came to my church, and they were singing a song, I get down on my knees and I worship you, and Jesus said, get down on your knees, you know, he's next to me. So I got down on my knees, and he knelt on his knees and was worshipping the Father with me, side by side, and I thought that was especially special, and we were worshipping the Father on our knees, and then suddenly I had a vision, and I was in heaven, and Jesus was on his knees next to me, and the Father, a big ball of light, was in front of us, and we were worshipping God together. So that's one of my favourite visions, because it was so good to see Jesus worshipping his Father, and he was right next to me, and we're together, we're worshipping God in the throne room. So that was a very special memory to me. Another time I was in a church, and Jesus turned up and he said, dance with me. So that it was a really free church where people could dance, and so I started to do this waltz with Jesus in my arms, and it must have looked strange with me waltzing with no one in my arms to other people, but as soon as I got into the rhythm of waltzing with him, we ended up in heaven, and we're in the throne room before the throne of God, and me and Jesus were waltzing, and that was a special memory too. What I have to say is Jesus will tell you to do things, and those things can be embarrassing, and on both occasions when I went on my knees in front of the church and I waltzed in front of the church, both occasions I was doing what Jesus had told me. I was being obedient, and on both those occasions I ended up in heaven, in a vision in heaven in front of God in the throne room. I would say that one of the keys to those visions of heaven was the fact that I was being obedient. So I've been obedient and got on my knees before at church and didn't end up in the throne room. So it's important to be obedient. So there's some of my visitations. One time, about a year ago, I was walking out of my unit and my house, and I saw Jesus. I often see him when he's walking. I see his cloak blowing in the wind, and I saw his cloak and saw him next to me, and I said to him, I'm seeing you every second day now. And he said, I'm with you every day. And I said to him, where is that in Scripture? And he said, lo, I am with you always. And I was amazed. He says, I'm with you all the time, and I'm with you every day, except I've been choosing to manifest myself every second day to you. And so that was real, that Jesus is with us, and he's travelling with us, and when he chooses to manifest himself to us, then we actually see him. It's a special relationship to walk and talk with Jesus. It's a tremendous time to spend with him. I'll never forget seeing him face to face and hearing him say the things about what he taught when he was on earth. I remember the times he visited us in the homeless hostel, and the other times I've seen him in the flesh, and I want to be sure that the next time I see him in the flesh that I'll have the courage to walk up to him and converse with him and ask him questions and talk to him. I think it's especially nice that he approaches me in a way that I can handle him. He's not dressed in fine clothes and dressed up as a businessman, but every time I've seen him in the flesh, he's been a homeless person. He's done really well for me a couple of times, speaking as a homeless person that I already knew, speaking through them and speaking to me. I remember one time I met a woman, and she gave me a hug, and she told me never to forget the hug that she was giving me, and I was told by Jesus that it was Mary Magdalene. So I've given her a hug, and that was especially that was special to me, and so it's really good to meet Jesus through other people. I've been good to a number of people where Jesus has come into me, and he's spoken to a person through me, and the person has been speaking face to face with Jesus through me, and so I know what it's like to be the person who's actually given a person a message of Jesus, and Jesus being in my body, speaking face to face with a person. So I know a couple of people who've experienced that of me, and they're very thankful for that happening. So there are some of my experiences. I encourage you to know the commands of Jesus and obey the commands of Jesus, and it says in John 14:21 that if we obey the commands of Jesus, then he'll manifest himself to us. And so I pray that this has been encouraging. Have you met Jesus? What have you got to say about this video? I'd love to hear from you. God bless.